This is in Photoshop. The new layout is telling you all the different options that you can change. Recent, saved, print. So if I do transfer over to print, it'll still give me all these page sizes. I'm just going to change the measurement to pixels and highlight this and just follow along where they have 800 by 800. So I'm just going to tab key this across pixels, but I'm going to change the resolution to 72. Normally I'd keep it always at 300 then reduce it, but just to follow along it'll give me this image. So you can kind of see it's just a square type image. They go over just having the foreground and background color a little bit dark brown, light brown, so you have these two elements. And then under the filter you can kind of see the section under render, and they even have one with fibers. If you remember, you did the brushed metal was a little different. So just kind of taking this across, you can experiment with this variance to try to get the browns light and dark. You can see the two colors. Strength, you can increase or change some of this. Randomize will just change the direction of that wood in a randomized setting. So click OK. So now you have this kind of a wood texture. They try to expand this. They like to make it twice the width by the height. So just to show you that's done, under image size, if you take it this part, you're going to change the height of this. You can see that this is in the same idea. If I go into the pixels in here, so it's 800, so I can change the height of this to 1600. Turn this off so it doesn't link them together, and click OK. See what that looks like. So now it's just made this to the top to bottom, and then they rotate it. So whether you choose to do this for your designs when you put it together, it'll still show for us. So I'm just going to make it a clockwise rotation. So now you have this wooden plank at the top, and then they're going to add some knots into the wood. So this layer right now is locked, so I'm just going to double click and open it up. I always tend to like to duplicate my layers. They don't mention that part of it. But then taking the ellipse tool, creating a shape, and holding the shift key down to create another one that's just putting random kind of knots in the wood. If I fill this with a color, just to show it to you, you can see how crisp and hard-edged it is, so I'm going to undo it. They have the idea of going into modifying the selection, so under Select, Modify, it has the feathering, and what the feathering does is that it softens the edge on this, so they recommend 30 pixels, so I click OK. Just to show you, I'm going to fill it again with the brown, and hopefully you notice it's faded off on the edges there. So I back that part out. So that's the section. So now under Filter, let's see if we have Distort and Twirl, you can see all these different options, and again, it's a good idea to experiment when you go through this. Here's the window that it's showing. I can subtract it out just to kind of locate where it's at and then zoom in on this knot, and you can see how far or how much I'd like to change this. And again, they give the measurement of like 205, so you can kind of get an idea of that. So the wood grain looks as if it's twisted through that. The View or Command H will hide these edges so you can lose that segment to it. And then the last item they have is using what they call an Unsharp Mask. So filter to sharpen. They have all these different things that relate to the pixels themselves, and the resolution is the same, but it's just the contrasting around the edges. So again, this gives you the entire window. You can zoom out. You can zoom into a detail just to see what it looks like. It's close-up pixelated. Remember, this is at 72, so if you can see that you can darken some of the sections on the side, trying to look for contrast within the pixels there. And click OK. So that gives you that wood section in Photoshop. Now, one last section is from doing what we've done before. You can take the text tool and place your name on this. Spell your name. Pretty good. Select all. This is the section, and see if you can't remember from before where you're taking this section and I just option and put a copy of it over the top, and if option in between the two to separate those layers, just hide these backgrounds. So remember, it has that section of it below, and you can't see it because it's the same texture, but once you double click on this, you can see here's the layer styles. So this is the part that it's going to. So if you have a bevel and emboss on the top of this, you can kind of place the shading kind of on the inside of this. There's the depth of it, for example. I'll hit OK and then let these background pieces show up. So now you can see it's kind of embossed and raised in this case. So here's the bevel emboss. I'll minimize this down a bit. If I click on down, it'll have the appearance of coming across, and then something with the shading angles, this circular piece, kind of changing that to transfer that over to the edge, and see about trying to create some type of a texture that you can place your name onto that. So I kind of have it like it's carved, lightly carved out. See how that looks, and I'm just moving the grain just a little bit. There's other ways to offset it, but just to show you. So if you have this layer selected, this will allow you to offset the grain of the wood just a little bit, so it looks like it's dropping over. But you can leave it. There's other ways that show a bitmap image that'll come across. And if you remember, you can even take this. I'm just going to take a section of this part and go to Layer, New, and I might copy it. This is just extra segment to it. So now this wood layer's on the top version of it, and I can do the same idea. Try to give some bevel emboss to this piece and see whether or not I can make it have the feel of it being a little bit separated from that initial look to it. So it's trying to see if I can make wood. You can even go to Edit, Transform, and then just flip it horizontally so the wood grain is the same, but it just happens to be the opposite of that. So it's trying to get you to experiment with the Photoshop. So let's see. So there you go.